How did you make your company name? What does Yego means?
Yego means yes.
Okay, is it Indian?
No, no, Yego is a Rwandan. The way we came up with it is that when we launched the company here, how do we find a name for the company? And the challenge was that if you came with a foreign name, it would be meaningless, or
Yep,
with an international name.
correct.
So we said that we asked one of our first employees. We said, "Can you just speak in your language?" And she said, "Sure." And when she started speaking in her language, then suddenly we asked, "Okay, stop. What did you just say?" She said, "Yego." So we said, "What does that mean?" And she said, "Well, it means yes." So I said, "Wow." I said, "Okay, if it means yes, then it's a good one for us." Yeah?
Yeah, yes is a
So
powerful word. Yes. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode. This is your host, David Kim. Hello, Karan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
it's my pleasure, David.
I'm looking at your profile in LinkedIn and on your website and talk about your business launch the Yegomoto revolutionary platform for the motorcycle taxis in Africa that provide a metered rides, cashless payment, create a job, and grows a small business. That sounds very good. I mean, sounds like you're solving a lot of problem. Also, in your LinkedIn profile, you mentioned that your previous life, counter-terrorism, homeland security solution, and keynote speaker on the communication technology and security. This sounds very interesting. I mean, I couldn't imagine you have this kind of unique background. I mean, you are the running a startup in Africa. So, can you please, I mean, help us connect the dot and then tell us who you are, the how you ended up the launching and running of the Yegomoto Rwanda.
Sure. So actually, my story starts a little way back. That when I finished my school, at that point in time, my father was starting a new business, and he asked me to join him. So I did my college through correspondence, and then I went and joined a semiconductor company where I got a lot of exposure to technology, and that was for 4 years. And while I was there, this whole concept of the personal computer came about, and I was in charge of a department there called the EDP department, Electronic Data Processing. And at that time, power would go off, and we would lose all our data. So we would have to spend nights, days and nights, basically rekeying in what was called at that time data entry. So we would have data entry operators having to work round the clock to be able to put the data back in. So I came up at that time with the concept I'm talking about now. This was 1985, 86. I started to think that, look, why don't we come up with a uninterruptible power supply system? So I left that company, started my own company in a garage, like most companies, like Apple, for example, started in a garage. I think a lot of entrepreneurs go back to starting in a garage. So I actually started in the garage, and not that company, but many companies in the same garage. But I started the company, and we started making UPS systems. And 3 years after making UPS systems, I saw that the fax machine had been launched. So I got quite excited because at that time only Toshiba and Panasonic were making fax machines. And I said, okay, from power supplies, let's go into communication. But I said that let's look at where the technology is available from. So I flew actually at that time to Taiwan to have a look at whether I could get scanners and stuff like that. And we found that the chip was coming from a US, the chipset was coming from a US company called Rockwell. So we then found that it's too expensive to buy the scanner. So we said, okay, why don't we put a card into the personal computer? And at that time, we had the IBM PC80. I'm talking about probably 1988, 89. And we started making fax cards. So you could send and receive a fax from your computer. At that time, the operating system was MS-DOS, and the word processing software was like WordStar. And we were allowed you to send a fax message from WordStar. So carrying on with the story of how from the fax, suddenly we got into Homeland Security, is that our fax cards got picked up by our army, our signals intelligence department, who wanted us to basically look at the possibility of intercepting cross-border communication. And it's a very interesting long story, but I think maybe too long for this podcast as to how we got picked up, how we got invited, how we got challenged to develop the technology for interception of access, and that we were able to do that in 24 hours and back in the same garage where I'd started the power supply company. So that pulled us into the Homeland Security business because suddenly we were working with all the intelligence agencies, and then we got put onto all the internal security companies. So we started working on Homeland Security, and over the years, we solved a lot of Homeland Security problems. And then I started another company called Comlabs, which basically from 1995 we have been working in the space of Homeland Security. So our approach has always been to pick up a problem that needs to be solved and then spend all our time and energy in solving that problem. If you want to connect the dots, so I came up to the point where we were working in Homeland Security, and then maybe you would like to me. The other obvious question is then, what brought me to Africa?
Right.
So we basically were working in Africa anyway, providing our security solutions. And then we visited Rwanda, and they said that at that time I was living in Singapore. So they said, "Oh, you come from a smart city. We also want Kigali to be a smart city." So I said, "Well, fantastic. But you are a landlocked country, and Singapore is a seaport. So how do we equate the two?" I said, "You obviously have different challenges, so why don't you tell me about your challenges?" And at that time, then they said, "Okay, our major challenge is to do with the transportation sector." So I said, "Could you be a little more specific?" And they said, "Well, our challenge is with the motorcycle taxi because they are the most prevalent form of transport." So if you take a city like Kigali, for example, city of population about 1.2, 1.3 million. At that time, they had about 700 buses, I would say about 900 taxi cabs, but they had 20,000 motorcycle taxis. Each motorcycle taxi would take about 30 passengers per day. So in a small city, you can say that about 600,000 trips were being made by motorcycle taxis. The challenge that the government had was on the safety. That means that the largest number of accidents involved a motorcycle taxi. It was one of the largest causes of death and impairment. And the other challenge that they had was, even though Rwanda is a very safe country, whatever little crime was committed, they felt motorcycle taxis were involved. Also, there was no way of monitoring these guys from where they go, what is their speed, do they have a license, who is driving the vehicle. So we put our Homeland Security cap on and created a complete solution for them. And we thought that we could just sell them the solution for $20 million and say bye-bye and leave. And when we presented the solution, of course, they said it's fantastic. It solves our problems, but we don't have the budget to purchase the solution. So I said, "Well, we spent a year doing on-the-ground research. What do you want us to do?" They said, "Well, why don't you find a way of monetizing it?" So I said, "Okay." I said, "That's interesting." So then we really looked hard at whether we would be able to make a scalable model out of the motorcycle taxis. And from solving a security problem, we ended up creating this entire platform of Yegomoto.
So, what is your business model and how do you make money?
I would say that our premise of making money always is maybe a little different from the way other companies look at it. So when we looked at the taxi industry, especially the motorcycle taxi industry, we first worked out that how much does it that the motorcycle taxi driver earns per day. Then we looked at it from a perspective that if we were to add value, what value would we add? And then what percentage should we take from him? So we were very transparent. So we actually went back at that time to the regulator of transport in the country, and we gave them all our costs of running the entire project. And we said that each motorcycle will be provided with a kit of $200. So there would be there would be a GPS, there would be a device, security device, there would be a meter, there would be charging for the devices as well as for the passenger. So we provide the kit, but we said, you work out and tell us how much we should charge. So the government came back to us at that point in time and said, we have your entire project and we think you should charge 10.5%. So we said, fine, let's start the project. So we get 10.5% from every motorcycle ride that is metered.
So did you work with the government body? I mean, when you started a startup, your company Yegomoto there?
So initially, we were involved with the government,
Okay.
and because it was we were solving a problem for the government.
Okay.
So when we got involved with the government of Rwanda, they said this is the problem. So when we were interacting with them, we designed the problem. I mean, we designed the solution by looking at the problem holistically. So we looked at all the different stakeholders. So we looked at the motorcycle taxi industry, we looked at the drivers, and we looked at everybody else who was interconnected with the motorcycle taxi industry, whether it was the police, the regulator, the city of Kigali, the tax authorities. We looked at it holistically. And then we came up with a platform and a solution that provided real-time visibility, transparency, accountability on all on all aspects of the business to all the different stakeholders.
I understand you launched and run the business your own capital, right? And
Yes,
haven't you thought about quickly scaling the business, working together with outside investor?
yes, we did, and we started off with our own capital, and I think significantly more than what other companies would have invested. So, I would say that over the period of time, we have actually invested maybe about $7 million, and we have taken on $5 million of debt. Now, we did go around looking for venture funding, but the challenge was most of the people who looked at our business model didn't kind of understand it. And at that point in time, they thought that companies like Uber or Bolt or all of the other ride-hailing companies would basically take over the entire market. So I think they had a challenge with giving us funding, and we said, fine, okay, we've got a completely different business model and a different idea from the likes of Uber. So I said, then we'll go out and prove it ourselves.
In fact, that is my questions. I heard about the Estonian Bolt and the Uber in Africa, but looks like the market is very, very fragmented. I have seen this so many ride-hailing app in Africa, each African country. However, I haven't seen any local company who has raised the money. I mean, get the valuation of unicorn. What is a unique challenge for ride-hailing app in Africa?
Well, the biggest challenge, I think, which a lot of people don't understand, because if you look at the way in which rides are hailed, so imagine a city, a small city with 20,000 taxis, for example. Like you live in Hong Kong, right? And I've visited Hong
Yes.
Kong many times. The moment you get out of a building, normally a taxi will pass you in a few seconds, if not in a
Yes.
few minutes. So, what technology do you use? You just put your hand out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
So that is the technology which you do. You put your hand out, you stop a taxi, you tell him where you jump in, tell him where you want to go, and off you go. So none of the ride-hailing companies have understood this part of the business model. Even till today, if you want to take an Uber, for example, and if you walk up to an Uber and tell him, let's go, he'll say, no, use your app. And then the app is going to find a driver who may be a kilometer, 2 kilometers from you, and you end up waiting 5 minutes while there's a car there. That was one challenge. Second challenge that we had was that most of the passengers here don't have a smartphone. And even if they have a smartphone, they can't afford the data. And they don't want to turn on GPS because they probably have a low cost phone and the battery will drain out. So we said, okay, how do we make a solution where the 99% of the business, which is done just by stretching your hand out and hailing a cab on the road or a motorcycle taxi on the road, how do you solve that problem? So we said, why don't we put the technology onto the motorcycle? So even when a person stops him on the road and wants to take a ride, he gets the ride, he gets the fare metering, he gets digital payments, he gets the fact that his ride is tracked. God forbid there's an accident or he loses something or he wants some kind of recourse. So we said we'll add all of that, but the passenger does not need to have a smartphone. Then we said, okay, how is he going to make digital payments? So one way, which is very popular, and you may have heard of a company called Safaricom that
Yes.
has launched uh, M,
M-Pesa.
yeah, M-Pesa. So M-Pesa is so prevalent that you don't need to carry cash. Now, if you have a smartphone, how are you going to tap and pay, right? So
Yep.
for us, it was like the octopus card
Yes.
or the Oyster card. So we made a small NFC sticker that you could stick onto your normal feature phone that had no smart in it, and you just tap that behind the meter. So a lot of time was spent or wasted between passenger and driver for negotiating. So we said, okay, let's take the negotiation out by introducing a fare, just like you have a metered fare in a taxi cab. Then we said, let's make the payments digital. So we said, how does you make it digital for a person who doesn't have a smartphone? So by giving him an NFC sticker, it was linked to his mobile money account. So he would tap and then he would just have to enter the PIN on his mobile phone, his normal feature phone, and the payment would go through. Then we found that even in areas in Kigali, we have 4G here, but in many places there is no network signal. So we said, okay, a person has finished a ride, he wants to pay, there's no network signal. How is he going to be able to make the payment? So we figured out a way for them without internet. If you have basic 2G, you're still able to make the payment seamlessly. So there was not just, I would say, challenges from a point of view of solving problems that were there from the government aspect, but it was taking into account the reality of what is the market. Everybody else was focusing on that 1% or sub 1% of people who had smartphones and wanted to go on a motorcycle taxi. We said, no, we want to focus on 100% of the market. So we'll start with the 99%, which puts his hand out and gets a taxi cab. And we'll also solve the other problem, which is basically the fact that many people sometimes don't even have airtime, or I've come from a foreign country, I don't speak the same language as a driver, or there is no concept of addressing in Africa. So in most places in Africa, you'll be surprised there is no formal address. So people navigate by landmarks. So even if I had to identify myself and say, come to my house, I would give you a landmark based. I'll say, come to MTN Center, go up the hill to Tigo. You will see a Great Seasons Hotel on the left. Take your first turn right, come down the road, we're house number 10. Now you can reach my house from anywhere.
Yes, I
So
have
how did we solve
experience.
that problem?
I
Yeah,
have
so how did we
experience.
solve that problem? Yeah, so we actually set up a 24 by 7 call center, which was toll free, which means that now anybody, even if you have no credit on your phone to make a call, you can call and ask for a taxi or a motorcycle taxi, and we'll send it to you. So we went from zero technology, so you can hail the ride on the street with your hand, to you basically don't even have airtime and you want to call a taxi to your house. We solved that problem as well. And then we went to find, okay, you want an app? Sure. You got the smartphone? Sure. Download the app and use it. So obviously we have an Android and iOS app. But the way at which we came at it was very, very different from everybody else.
Your approach is very ambitious and very proactive. It sounds like instead of the complaining about the weak infrastructure, basically you reshaped, rebuild the infrastructure for the Rwanda. That's a part of the government role, right?
Yeah, true. So we basically came in and we got the license. So we created the concept, we proved the concept with our own money. Then we got a license. And well, that came up with its own challenges, because when you come under a regulatory body, then things are no longer under your control. If you start up a company and there's no regulation, then you're free to grow the way you want, right?
I think that approach you can solve a lot of problem. If somebody, some investor willing to invest a lot of money, build the infrastructure as you did so far, then question is, I mean, if you invest a lot of money and then the provider devices and then even finance the motorcycle, even we finance willing to finance the motorcycle, then do you think there is enough demand or the sizable opportunity for this type of business idea in Rwanda?
In Rwanda, definitely, and even in obviously the neighboring countries as well. I mean, if you look at Rwanda, there are about 60,000 motorcycle taxis here. If you look at Tanzania, they're about 1.1 million. Uh, Kenya is over 1.2 million. Where it all started, Uganda is also about 1.2, 1.3 million. So there are about 3.6 million in the neighboring countries of motorcycle taxis. But the way in which we look at business is, like I said to you, is a little different. So from a perspective of, okay, how are we going to be viable in this? So we said that, okay, first thing I told you is that we are not looking at the 1% of the rides, which is where Uber and Bolt compete and fight for that 1% of the market. We address the 99% of the market, which is street hailed. So what it gives us, it gives us scale. So if you just think about it in a very simplistic term, a motorcycle taxi to come onto the road virtually across Africa, he is spending $4 to $5, whether he's renting the motorcycle or is leasing the motorcycle. Then he's putting $3 to $4 of fuel, depending on how much he drives a day. So his cost for coming onto the road is anywhere between $8 to $9 a day. Then he works 12 hours a day and he hopes to make at least $5, $6, $7 on top of that. We have seen the outliers can make on a motorcycle taxi $30, $40. But let's take the average and say that even if the average income is, say, 14, 15, $16, his cost is 8, right? So he's making 100% on top of that. So our business model, when we calculated it, said that, look, if there are 20,000 motorcycle taxi drivers, and if we were to even charge a fixed fee of $1 a day, that's $20,000 a day, correct? So
Yeah.
if you say that, okay, you're going to take the work month as 25 days, that's $500,000 from one city coming in, right? Well, that's a significant amount of money. So
Yeah.
the actually the business is very, very viable. But now let's jump back. There are $8 which are being spent, right? So now if you start to provide also the motorcycle taxi and you have a platform like ours, which is tracking you in real time, so we know where the asset is, we can repossess the asset. So a lot of times motorcycles get stolen. We have got 100% recovery rate of the motorcycles. So we have a way to locate the motorcycle and to shut it down so you can recover it. But look at it in the future. You've got fuel, you've got a motorcycle. So of course we can give a hydrocarbon petrol motorcycle. But what if we were to start giving these guys electric motorcycles and then to do the charging itself? Now instead of charging or relying on the fact that I want to make 10% income, and I will make between $1 to $1.5 because $1 is if he's breaking even, $1.5 is worst case scenario for him. But now if I access that $8 a day, which is his fixed spend, I can again give him an asset, which is an electric vehicle, but I also become the petroleum or the energy company providing him with charge batteries. So I can even access that. So if I lower the cost and instead of telling him that, okay, a petrol motorcycle costs you $8 to $9, why don't you come in electric, take an electric vehicle from us and we'll give it to you with charge batteries for $6 or $7, depending upon how many battery swaps he needs. So now you've got another business model based on the fact that you have access to a large population of the motorcycle taxis.
I understand. I mean, there is a enough demand for the that kind of investment. Also, that demand is I mean fast growing. I think it make a lot of sense.
Yeah, so the motorcycle taxis are here to stay. I mean, the biggest challenge that you have is if you look at Nairobi and Kampala, uh, they have gridlock because of traffic. And if you're in the city very often in Nairobi, for example, or Kampala, you will not plan more than 2 or 3 meetings a day because I have missed flights where in 1 hour my taxi cab has moved maybe 1 kilometer. So there, the motorcycle taxi is the only way to get around town. So and also where infrastructure is not developed. So even in Kigali, you have beautiful motorable roads, but there are parts of the city where only a motorcycle taxi can take you. So motorcycle taxis, I think, are going to be in Africa, I would say, for the next 10, 15 years at least.
Hearing what you explain about your business model, I came to think that then do you have a plan to expand the delivery business using that your platform?
So delivery business we already started
Okay,
when lockdown happened in March. We already started the delivery services. But what we see also is interesting is that the delivery service is there, but because everybody also gets, I would say, tired of lockdown. When lockdown opens up, then people prefer to go out themselves because they're tired of sitting at home. So the delivery
sure,
services then comes down
sure.
dramatically. So the moment lockdown is lifted, so we have delivery services, but what we have also focused on is actually in creating a marketplace that we have not launched yet because of this. You open up the economy, then we go to lockdown, then we open up the economy, then we go to lockdown. So we haven't launched the other part, but the idea, the concept that we had earlier on was to create a marketplace so that not only would you deliver food and fresh groceries and drinks and whatever else, but you would also be able to do a delivery of manpower. So you want an electrician, you want a plumber, you want a cleaning lady, you want anybody else. So to provide services also on the same platform and to create a marketplace where virtually anybody could come up and put up like a virtual shop. And well, not really, I would say Amazon, but Amazon like. So we have developed that entire platform, but we haven't launched it yet because we don't think the time is right.
Do you think you have a competitor, or do you believe that your business model very unique, so you don't really have a competitor?
I don't think we have a competitor because if you look at everybody else, everybody is app based. We are
Yes,
possibly the only metering company. So we call it, in fact, the government has even put it as a term in their license. So we basically call our device an ICFM. So it's an intelligent connected fare meter. So because of that, I think we are very different that we provide the meter device to the taxi. So, like motorcycle taxis, we also have taxi cabs in Rwanda, as you're probably aware. And we have 100% of the licensed taxi cab market is with Yego, called Yego Cabs. So, our technology is so different, and the fact that we bring in so many bits and pieces that other people haven't even been able to think about. And because we are putting technology, we have complete control that the hardware is from us as well. So I really don't think that there's anybody who can come in and compete with us. And also, I would say that the other factor which would be a challenge for another company that wants to come in. Most, so if you look at Uber, they're charging 25%. Bolt is charging 20%. Other companies which are coming in are charging about 15%, 10%. From our business model, we have looked at it and we have said, we would be able to make money, not just break even if we were to charge a fixed fee of a few dollars a day. So we'll give you all the rides. We'll give you access to a 24/7 call center, which will also give you rides. We also do one very big thing, I think, for these guys is that because we're digitizing, organizing, and training them, and we're capturing each and every ride, including the ones which you hail from putting your hand out, we're able to generate credit scores. So in Rwanda, for example, we were able to get 3 taxi cabs before the lockdown started. Uh, 3 of these drivers got brand new 0 kilometer cars. Now, most of the people in Rwanda import second-hand cars. So a taxi driver could never ever imagine that he would be able to buy a brand new car, what they call a 0 kilometer car. But we were able to get 3 of them to get finance from a bank and to get brand new cars. And how could they do it? Because the bank could see how much money these guys have been making for the last 6 months and could see live on the platform.
that sounds like a very interesting part of your value chain.
So I think we're a game changer in the sense of taking these guys, digitizing and training them, but at the same time also opening up avenues for them to be able to access finance and then to be able to pay back. A lot of these people have not even finished school or gone to college, so they don't have the financial acumen to be able to do planning. So what we say is that since these guys live day to day and hand to mouth, if they were to buy an asset and have to plan that, okay, I'm going to have to pay back the bank $400 or $450 at the end of the month, he can't afford it. But if we decrement that value from him on a daily basis, he is able
Yeah.
to pay it. So we do his
Yes.
financial management. So
So the,
now we are planning to add two other things. One, we are planning to add that most of these people, when they wake up in the morning, they have no money, not even money to fill up their tank. So in Africa, a lot of times you take a taxi cab or a moto, the first thing he'll do is he'll take you to a fuel station and say, boss, can you give me like 500 bob? I need to tank up. Okay, because he doesn't have fuel. So we are also building into our platform that he can access credit instantaneously, and at the same time he can make payments back. No one has thought of this industry and to say that, okay, since they have so many accidents and so many problems, none of them have insurance. So God forbid someone gets injured, he loses a lifetime's work. So we are saying, fine, but we can actually give you digital insurance, which is what we want to do when we launch in Kenya, that all our taxi guys will get insured automatically. So they will have accident insurance and they will have health insurance, not only for themselves, but for their family. But it's all built into our model. And
yeah.
the reason why I believe that there's no competitor is I could basically outrun any other company that wants to come in and play with us by saying, okay, we'll just charge $1 a day.
Yeah.
Come and compete with us.
It make a lot of sense once you, I mean, establish the scale, right? They make a lot of sense, and then that's much more important information, credit information for those kind of people. I mean, driver, because I believe that they don't have a financial record history, which bank feel interested in reviewing, right? So I can imagine value you can add. Also in terms of value chain of drive, how many people you have on your platform?
So at this point, we are still in Kigali. We haven't even covered Rwanda yet because the intention was last year to have finished Rwanda and to have opened Kenya up. But because of COVID, we have got delayed. We have about 5,000 motorcycle taxi drivers and 1,000 taxi cab drivers. But now that lockdown has been lifted, we have another 15,000 devices. So we will cover, I would say, about 90% of the motorcycle taxi business in
Wow,
Kigali. And
that's a
then we
lot.
will look at it. Yeah, so we have 100% of the licensed taxi cab. We tend to do about 90% of the motorcycle taxi because uh, the challenge is that with the way COVID has come in and people have started to work from home, we feel that the demand is going to fall. So we feel that actually the number of motorcycle taxis that will operate in Kigali may drop down. So we feel 20,000 will cover it. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the electricity motorcycle or scooter business model? Let's say assuming that there is a smart international investor who is interested in the making huge amount of investment, for example, 100 million US dollar, or if you need more than that, they are willing to make investment, believing in your business model. What is the best case long-term plan strategy to run this electricity scooter business in Rwanda or other part of Africa?
So in Rwanda, there's one, I would say, big advantage that the president, I think almost a year and a half ago or earlier, has announced that phasing out of all petrol motorcycles. So he, in fact, gave a deadline. So there's, I think,
When is the deadline?
the deadline should have been 2021. By the end of 2021,
This year, then.
all motorcycle, yeah, this year. It was supposed to be, but we have lost 1 year with COVID. So
Okay.
we were supposed to go 100% electric. So that means 100% electric. So even if you look at least in the main capital city, because obviously electric means you need to have charging infrastructure.
Yes.
So you can't take the motorcycle to a rural area where there is no electricity and then say, okay, we are going to go solar. I don't think Africa is ready for that yet. Uh, but certainly in Kigali, we would be able to provide 20,000 electric motorcycles and be able to provide with the infrastructure for being able to charge them as well. So if any investor looks at it from a perspective of, is there any company that can come and completely disrupt the ride hailing industry, like the big boys like Uber and all who continue to be there? I think it would be a company like us, because we are coming in with so many differentiators, but we are so close to the ground in solving real life problems that we could basically bring scale that Uber simply would not be able to match at a price point where they would find it easier to just leave the market than to try and compete. For the investor, the basic thing is going to be that the revenue stream is not going to come from only one place. So it's not going to come from just the percentage, or like I'm proposing a fixed daily fee, but it
Yeah.
would also come from either asset finance, or basically, why do you even want to sell the electric motorcycle? Because in an electric motorcycle, 60% of the cost is the battery. So even though lithium ion prices are coming down, and there are many more technologies, like sodium ion batteries that are supposed to come out, it will take a couple of years before these batteries come out. But the battery cost today is a large proportion. So if you try to
Yes.
sell the asset and the battery is 60% of the cost, that means 3 years later, if the battery is dead, the poor driver now has to make another investment of 60%. But if you as a company manage the asset and keep the asset on your balance sheet, and you then make the asset sweat much more than the driver would be able to, because you give it to a driver, he is keeping on giving you a daily return. If for any reason he wants to leave the industry or doesn't want to work, you take the asset back and you can give it to another driver, because you have everybody on your
Yes.
platform. So
Right.
you have complete control over the, I would say, not only the asset, but also the fact is whether the asset is being properly utilized. And the biggest challenge for any investor is, what is my risk? But if someone was to come and actually look at our platform, I think it would blow their minds. We have had people who have invested in Uber come here, look at our platform, and said, my God, we have seen Uber's platform and other big companies similar to Uber. And they said, we have never seen a platform like yours. Why? Because we didn't come from ride hailing. We came from creating a platform that created this entire transparency, visibility, accountability, and then put on the ride hailing part. So our core is very different.
Based on your business plan, what is your assumption of acquisition cost of one e-bike?
So right now we are getting two companies to develop motorcycles for us, because we don't believe that any of the existing motorcycles will be suitable. And the reason for that is, if you look at electric motorcycles, most of them are being made for sport purposes. So they're
Yeah.
very fancy, they're high speed or whatever, or you have then the very low end. The challenge in Africa is,
Yeah.
yeah, no, especially no, first is the technical side. So in a country like Rwanda, we call it, the land of 1,000 hills. So you have very steep roads. Africans are normally big people, they're large people. So technically, the motorcycle should be able to carry 200 kilos and up even a 30-degree gradient. Now, there are very few motorcycles that can do that. So we're getting an electric motorcycle developed. We believe the initial cost of it will be maybe around $2,400.
Mhm.
But eventually, when we start to scale it, we would be able to bring that cost down. But we would have a solid motorcycle that is made for taxi use. All the other motorcycle taxis that we have tested, I've been to China. I was there for a long time in December of 2019 when COVID-19 had just started. And I visited maybe about 20, 30 different manufacturers and tested their vehicles. Not one was suitable for Africa. So we're getting the products specifically designed for Africa. And I think that we would have a proper fit, whether it's for carrying people or for providing services.
Yeah, I can imagine that situation. Actually invested a Korean rechargeable battery company, and then also motorcycle company. They manufacture all different motorcycle, including the e-scooter. So we actually ran the economic viability of for the motorcycle. That time, as you mentioned, the battery cost too much. So it doesn't justify. It didn't justify the, I mean, price competitiveness relative to the conventional motorcycle. But I believe, as you mentioned, the battery price dropped a lot, so it makes sense for the even for the economic viability. Can you? What can we expect from you and Yego this year? And also, what is your end game in Africa?
So this year we are basically just trying to complete our rollout right now in Kigali,
Mhm.
and then we will look at how that goes to see whether we will go to the other townships in the 9 other cities in Rwanda. But at the same time, we are now looking at launching in Kenya. We have got a lot of interest from the different sectors, from the taxi cabs, from the boda bodas, which is the motorcycle taxi, and also from the matatu market, which is buses that ferry customers. They're privately owned. So we are looking at starting off in Kenya this year. So God willing, COVID doesn't come back and hit us hard, we would be able to launch our services in Kenya. And I think the growth in Kenya will be much, much faster because it's a larger economy. And we are already finding that, like, we have taken on, people were shocked. We are a startup. And as a startup, if you're able to get $5 million of debt, that means that obviously the bank is more difficult to deal with than a venture capitalist, right? So when a bank is willing to give you debt, that means that the bank actually believes in your model. So similarly, when we go into Kenya, I think the pools of funding which are available there, whether it's venture debt or debt from a bank or from an HNI or whatever, is going to be much easier for us. So even there, we intend to launch with brand new vehicles rather than trying to do the same thing of, let's take the old vehicles and continue to work in the same way. Because one of the predominant factors I think that differentiates us from the other companies is we look at it very differently. We say, how can we make life better for every taxi driver by giving him a livable wage and letting him work with dignity? I don't think there's another company in the mobility space that looks at life like that. So when I talk to our team here also, I keep reminding them. I said, who is our customer? And sometimes people who are new will say, it's the passenger. And I said, no, our passenger is our customer's customer. Our customer is the taxi driver. So if you don't breathe, sleep, dream about how to make life better for your taxi driver, we will never succeed.
Yes, that's a new way of approach these days. Very popular. I mean, consider employee as your customer and partner. Agree.
You're absolutely right, yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, we are focusing on the Yego business. We obviously have, because of the other companies that we have other solutions that have come up. We have a completely unique patent pending solution for helping contact tracing in COVID-19, which is something very similar to what has been launched by Singapore and by New Zealand. But it's come up we have created something, I think, which is again unique there. And that solution also, we are getting a lot of good traction, even from the developed countries like the US and Europe. So hopefully that would be another thing that we would be able to bring into Africa to help them open up their economies. Because biggest challenge that's facing Africa today is the loss of jobs, and that the fact that the economies have been very hard hit. Not only is there a cost for the government to provide medical care and all the facilities that didn't exist before, and to be able to test everybody and to do all of that, but the slowing down of the economy has been a big problem. So we have many good ideas. We have many solutions apart from Yego. So like Yego was born out of a need. Our way is to look at things very pragmatically and saying, are we really going to solve a problem? I mean, is there really a problem that we can solve? Because if there's a problem that needs to be solved, we're happy to jump in.
Okay, I mean, thank you so much for the taking time to be on the show and sharing the interesting, ambitious plan of Yego to solve the problem in Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, share with a friend, and drop me a review. Goodbye.